You're locked into the summer series with your man Louie T here on the Louie T Network. As the temperatures get hot outside, so does the content here on the Louie T Network. So stay cool. Your man Louie T is talking to some of the best in the business, talking National Football League. Enjoy the summer series. All right, so we're back with the summer series. I'm here with a guest that needs no introduction. I'm so excited because you guys, you know, I'm a nerd. I'm a football nerd. I'm a geek when it's all said and done. And I think I got somebody I can nerd out with today. This is a guy that spent the first 6 years of his career here in Washington, came back to us after he was done, now works with the team on the broadcast team with London and Bram, doing the games. He's part of the flagship program, Command Center, the podcast as well. Probably the favorite thing that he does of mine is the game plan, where he's talking to the coach, breaking down film. And so without any further ado, we are talking to the one and only Logan Paulsen here on the summer series today. Thank you for joining me on the program today, man. I can't thank you enough for your time, man. How you doing?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. You know, it's a good opportunity to get out of the heat.
Yeah.
Being on this podcast talking to you. So looking forward to it.
All right. So I've been doing this for a while now. I've been doing this for over a decade, but I've been a fan of football my entire life. I think philosophically I've come to this conclusion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here with me talking. I think after seeing Dan Campbell and what he's done in Detroit, listening to Chris Cooley talk for years, and then watching you do what you do, outside of the quarterback position, I think the tight ends are the smartest players on the field because they have to know what every single position group on the field, offensive and defensive, is doing at all times. Is that accurate or not?
I don't know if they're the smartest, but they're forced to kind of learn the most football, to your point, right? Yeah. So, you know, for example, receivers, they have to know pass concepts, right? Running backs, they have to know protection and run scheme. Offensive line, they know the protection call, they know the run philosophy. But, you know, as a tight end, obviously, I got to know pass concepts, I got to know protections, I got to know back responsibilities. Right. And it just slowly over the course of time gets beat into you. Yeah. So you get to learn kind of a global picture of an offense, you know. And it's funny when you talk to even quarterbacks, you know, I think this has been a really interesting kind of revelation to me. Like, they don't have the same understanding of the run game that, like, I do, for example. Right. They don't understand the issues in protection because they think about it in a different way. And so I do think it's a privilege to play the position because you're exposed to all elements of offensive football. And through offensive football, you get to learn a lot about defensive football. So I definitely think it is one of those positions that's uniquely kind of skilled and tasked with learning a multitude of different things that just make you, that force you to be smarter at football, I guess.
I think that is spot on because, you know, also as a tight end, you got to know where the safety is. You got to see what the linebacker's doing. Same with the corners, right? You got to block the defensive lineman. You know, as a tight end, you're an extension of the offensive line. So I just feel like the tight end position, just like you said, it forces you to be smart and take in all of that ball. I want to start with you first before we get to the actual team itself. You were undrafted in 2010. When did you know? Like, you talk to most players and there's the aha moment, like, I belong here. I know I can play in this league. When did you know I belong here? I can play in the National Football League?
That's a tough question for me because I knew I belonged, but I always kind of knew that I was on the edge. You know what I mean? So, like, I think the first week of practice when I was kind of settling in. And I wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually remember thinking, like, this is a little bit it's a little bit easier to be good here than it is in college. Because you don't have to worry about class. It's just all ball all the time, and that's your sole focus. And, like, you get in the building at 7 o'clock, you do your workout, you watch film, and you just had so much more time to learn and progress in the game. And I was like, I can get there. But I think the thing is about being undrafted that makes it tough is that, you know, you always are aware of the fact that every team passed on you 7 times. You know what I mean? And so you're always like, they're always looking for somebody better than you. And one of the things about being undrafted is there's always that stigma. You know, oh, this guy was a 3rd-round draft pick. The league saw him with this type of value. And then for me as an undrafted guy, the league, you know, they don't value undrafted guys usually the same way. So I was always kind of stressed and anxious about being cut. But in terms of kind of identifying the speed and the complexity of the NFL game, like that happened pretty early. And I was like, I can make it happen. Now it just comes down to whether or not they'll allow me to stick around and figure it out. You know what I mean? So.
All right. So what is your favorite play of your career?
Favorite play of my career.
Favorite play.
I got a bunch. You know, like there was I had a really good block on Von Miller, and you know Von Miller is not going to remember the block, but like it's one of those things where it's like that's Von Miller, and I did this to him.
Right.
It's kind of bittersweet, but I scored a touchdown in 2012 in the playoff game against Seattle. And that was pretty spectacular. Not for me, but just to kind of be at the epicenter of like maybe the most excited fan base in the country, the most excited fan base I'd ever been a part of. To be in the stadium, to feel the energy, that was pretty cool. And obviously it's tainted by the fact that, you know, we end up losing that game and Robert gets hurt and the trajectory of the organization changes. But yeah, like there's a lot of plays like that where it's like like there's a game I had against that no one's going to remember when I was playing against Indianapolis, and it was one of the more physical games I've ever played in my career. And the things that taught me about myself over the course of that game was something I've carried the rest of my life. So basically, long story short, there's probably not a specific play. There's, you know, the Von Miller thing. There's the touchdowns. There's the I had a one-handed catch against Kansas City that was pretty cool. I had a nice catch in the playoff game against the Cowboys to kind of key first down to kind of get us on a drive to get the go-ahead touchdown. Those things are awesome, but they all kind of meld together. And it's funny, like it's kind of nice that you asked me that question because I very rarely think about the good times. I always think about the bad ones. Like, oh, I missed that pass protection, I missed that call, or I should have run the route like this to get open. And so it's good to kind of think about the positive stuff. But there's a couple, and it's nice to think about them. You
know what though? That's being a competitor, right? When you're a competitor, you think about all of the things that you didn't do right. Like I know for myself, I can speak for myself. I hate losing more than I love winning. So I learn a lot more when I do something wrong versus when I've done something correct, right? So what do you think my favorite Logan Paulsen play is? Take a guess. Take a stab.
Oh gosh, I have no idea. Can I get a hint? Is it a catch? Is it a reception?
Yes, it is.
It's a reception. Was it versus the Giants?
Of course it was.
Okay. Giants, was it the Robert Griffin rollout? You know,
yes. Fourth down, fourth and 10.
Yeah, fourth and 10. Yeah.
Left.
Yeah. That's a great play, man. I love that play.
God. That's a great catch. I don't think you realize how difficult of a catch that was. Like, you know, Robert's doing all that dancing around outside of the pocket, you know, extending the play. But you got to dive. You got to cradle it. You know, you got to turn over and make sure you catch that puppy. It's fourth down. The game's over if that's not caught. Then you get up.
I always tell people that's you know, I caught it, but that's Robert's play. You know what I mean? Like Robert.
But you were a big part of that play, though. You know, the only thing that sucks is that we didn't win that game, right? Like,
yeah, we didn't win that game. It's funny, all those plays that I remember fondly, very few of them did we win the game.
Didn't result in a victory, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So, last thing here, and then we'll continue to transition. Would you prefer to have a touchdown pass or reception or a big block that springs the touchdown? What gives you the most satisfaction?
I mean, there's something they're kind of walk the fence here. They're satisfying in their own ways, and so one is like you ran the route, you found the open space, and you caught the ball. There's something especially sweet, though, however, about putting your hands on other human beings and feeling your helmets mashed together and leveraging them correctly and knowing that you've protected your teammate and they've scored a touchdown. There's something very fulfilling about that from a physical competitor standpoint. So I think they're both awesome. Like, again, like the rush of the crowd when you catch a touchdown, there's nothing like it. The cheer, the roar, the energy from your teammates. It's so special. But there's something also cool about being the guy that did the nasty thing.
Yeah.
And you get to see the guy celebrating in the end zone. That makes it really special. So I'd say probably blocking somebody. And again, that speaks to kind of my career as a blocking tight end.
Right.
But I do think that there's something especially kind of beautiful in the savagery of it that I really enjoy.
Oh my God. There's that 99% of the population will never, ever understand what you just described, like mashing helmets together and the physicality that comes with that and moving a man against his will. Like that's incredible to hear you describe it in that manner. Your favorite season of your career?
This is a no-brainer for anybody who's been a Washington fan. It's the 2012 season.
Good.
Like that's the favorite season I've had. I played not football, but I played sports throughout my life. I was a three-letter athlete in high school. I've done a lot of sports, a lot of leagues, a lot of whatever, college, the whole deal. There's nothing like that 2012 season. Nothing like it. Like the way the city supported it, the way the offense was clicking, the coaching staff. I mean, everyone talks about that staff now with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel,
Matt LaFleur,
all those guys, right? Very special offensive staff. Kind of to see the magic of Robert Griffin in that offense that year before everything got convoluted and weird. It was just special, and then to be a part of it, I think, was the other thing. Like I've been a part of winning seasons prior where I, didn't have a big role, but I had a pretty significant role on that team, and they relied on me for a lot of stuff, and that was really cool. And so it's the city, it's the group of guys was fantastic. My role on the team was fantastic. So it's definitely got to be that 2012 season.
And it's interesting because a huge chunk of the fan base, especially people watching this particular episode, their greatest season of fandom, because there are a lot of younger fans that haven't experienced a lot of winning. 2012 is that season for them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a game that I remember. I don't know if you remember. You guys went to Tampa, and it was early in the season, like week 4. And you were down late in the game. You really dominated the game, but you found yourself trailing like 22 to 21 late in the game. And you guys drive down, and Robert gets you guys into field goal range. And I didn't think we were going to win because Billy Cundiff, I don't know if you remember him. Yeah. He had missed 3 field goals in that game. It was, and one of them was like from 20-something yards, it felt like. So I was like, oh, Lord, the game's coming down.
Here we go.
Yeah, right. And I think it was like a 41-yard field goal. If it was 42, he would have missed. Okay, that thing barely crept in like left upright, right? And I've never seen you jump this high before or after in your life. You ran up to the pile, the little mob that happens after the field goal kicker makes the kick. Logan, you might have gotten 7-8 inches off the ground, like
7 or 8. Yeah.
You know what? Let's call it 2 feet off the ground, okay?
There we go. I got both feet off the ground.
You were off the ground. Can you dunk a basketball?
Yeah, I can dunk. It's not great, but I don't know if I can dunk one now, but I could when I was at my.
That's when I said
I could just get it.
Look. As long as you can get it over the rim, man, and grab it, it's all good. I said Logan can dunk a basketball when I saw you jump. You got off your feet, man. You were up there, right? Yeah. You were excited. I wonder, you seem like the type of teammate that you were probably more excited for Billy in that moment because he had missed all of those kicks, and him making that kick to give you a chance, to win the game. You probably felt really good for him. But anyway, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I think the thing about I just really enjoyed football. I really enjoy the small victories. Like there's something incredibly satisfying about being part. Have you played football before? I'm sure you have. And there's something incredibly powerful about just leaving that stadium with more points than the other team. Yeah. And it's the whole week of prep, everything that goes into it, and so in those moments, man, it's exhilarating. Yeah. And thinking back on it, I'm getting chills a little bit because it's like you don't get anything like that where 53 guys and 20 coaches are working for 5 days out of the week, 6 days out of the week to get you ready for this moment, and then all the adversity, the ups and downs, the ins and outs that go through, and then to get the win in that fashion was pretty special. And that anytime you get a win, it's worth celebrating. So
Yeah, that like you said, that 2012 season was magical, and you know, having been an athlete, not at a high level like yourself, but the thing you always hear people talk about is the camaraderie, right, in the locker room,
oh yeah,
and like you said, going to war with your guys, and that 2012 season for most of us as fans, it epitomized like a team, banding together in the face of adversity. You just talked about adversity, and you guys are 3-6, right? And
yeah,
Mike Shanahan was talking about evaluating guys for next season, and the Panthers sucked that year. You lose to them in the homecoming game. You go into the bye. It feels like the season's over. You come off the bye, and you just go on this magical run, right? Um, it, I've heard you talk about this a bunch, but when you were going through that season and you were seeing how things were going, I want to get into your mind heading into that playoff game. Before Robert's injury, before things unraveled, maybe you felt like they were unraveling already after the Cleveland game. I mean, all of that stuff came out after the fact. I don't know if in the moment you guys saw that there could be some issues with the way things were handled with the whole Kirk and Robert situation, but after beating Dallas in week 17 and how momentous of a win that was, making it to the playoffs, winning the division, having a home playoff game, starting that game out like gangbusters, 14-0. In that moment, you caught a touchdown early in that game. In that moment, what did you think this was going to be, and the trajectory, like you said, of the organization and Robert and everything that was going on at that time, even with the coaching staff, and the defense was solid. Like, it was a really good group of players, and it felt like at times they overachieved, and there was so much more that you guys could have tapped into had you been able to stay on that same path. Talk to me about your mindset heading into that playoff game.
yeah. I mean, I think it wasn't just me. I think we all thought we were going to win the Super Bowl. Like, that's how we felt. Like, we were so confident as a group, as an offense. We were so confident in Robert defensively. We just understood how to play team ball. And I think it speaks, honestly, that year. And I just, remembering back or hearkening back to those memories, just how important it is to believe. And like, we, over the course of that 7-game stretch, like you were talking about, we just came to believe in each other and the team and ourselves. And I'm not kidding. Like you said, we were not the most talented football team by a long shot. But we thought we were going to, no one could beat it. Nobody could beat us that year. Yeah. Nobody. And obviously Robert's injury kind of derails everything, and for Robert and for the team. And I look back at that, and if Robert stays healthy, like, I probably retire Commander or Redskin at the time. Like, I really believe that, like, because of how good he was, because of how simplistic defenses had to play him, because of how he was able to elevate my game, because of his ability as an athlete. And so it was a tough thing. Looking back on it, it's hard to think about, because, again, it was such a special run, such a special moment. We were so confident. And it wasn't just confident in that year. It was confident in the future, too, because we believed that we had found the answer at quarterback, that Kyle understood how to maximize him, that Mike knew how to manage the personalities. And obviously a lot of information's come to light since then about those relationships and how they weren't kind of what they appeared in the moment. But yeah, I think it wasn't just us. It wasn't just me. Everyone that I talked to, that I hung out with, we thought, man, this is it. We're going to be a part of, insert your dynasty here. We were going to be the Seattle, what Seattle became. That was our trajectory in that moment. And obviously didn't work out that way. So
yeah, you know what? It's funny that you say you thought you were going to win the Super Bowl. I thought we were going to the NFC Championship game. I
100%.
knew we were going to beat Seattle. I felt good about beating Atlanta. That's who we would have had to play, because you lost to them in the regular season, but Robert got hurt in that game, if you recall.
Right.
And Kirk had to finish that game. I thought we could beat them. We could go there. I didn't think we could beat San Francisco that year, though. they were really good defensively. But I would have loved to have seen it.
We thought we could beat them. I mean, that's how confident we were.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought we could do anything, and maybe that was unrealistic or unfounded, but we just believed beyond a shadow of a doubt. And again, I think that's one of the things that makes that year so special is that I've never experienced that level of confidence in any team I played on.
I don't think this fan base has experienced that kind of confidence since either. So I think that makes something that we have in common. But all right, let's transition to a little bit more current. You played under Mike and Kyle. You played for Jay as well. You were here working for the organization during Ron's pretty much his entire tenure here. What would you say is the biggest difference between all of those tenures and what you're currently seeing manifest itself in Washington right now with Adam Peters as the general manager and, of course, Dan Quinn as the head coach?
What is the difference? I definitely think, one of the difference maybe is the wrong word, but what I do see is that there is a clear understanding of what it takes to create a winner. Now, is the winner going to be created? I don't know. But the hiring of Adam Peters, like I was in San Francisco in 2017 with Adam Peters, and so I got to meet him there and see his process and understand him. And I've talked with him off the field a couple of times just through mutual friends and things like that. There is no better person qualified for this job. So, great hire. Then you go out and you say, well, we've got to find a coach to kind of fit this idea, to fit Adam Peters, to fit what we want to be. And I played for Dan in 2017, 2018. And he is such a good motivator, such a good builder of community and culture and confidence. And I just thought, like, in terms of two great hires, two people that are extremely competent at their positions, there's a delineation there. You mentioned a comparison like when Ron was here. Ron had, in my opinion, and I would probably tell him this to his face, had just too much going on. He couldn't be an expert in terms of off-season draft evaluation. There's just too much information, and also be an expert on in-season roster management. Like, there's so much to do, and so I love that there's delineation in both positions. You mentioned when Jay was here, like, I think Jay's an awesome dude. I love hanging out and talk. You've seen him on social media. The way he talks about football is incredibly intelligent. He, I think, he had a hard time, I think, stepping into the role of being like, I am the leader of this team. I'm the head coach and not the offensive coordinator. And so I think Dan, having played for him and having watched him now in his new tenure, really understand what it means to be a head coach. You're holding a standard. You're building an identity for this team and this organization. And I think he understands that. And I think he cherishes that opportunity. And I think he's well equipped to handle that, just in terms from a personality standpoint. So I think in terms of differences in comparison, I do think the staff, when I first got here under Mike Shanahan, was really special. I think Mike really understood that as well. I think the issue came down to just managing personalities with the old owner, Dan. And, Dan, I'm not going to say anything positive or negative about him, but I think having him gone and letting your football operations do what they're supposed to do, I think is something that this staff is going to have the ability to do that Mike didn't have. So I think when you look at the Christmas tree, starting with Adam Peters and working your way down, and then you look at the Josh Harris and the ownership group, I think the ecosystem is set up in a way that I haven't seen since I started playing here, since I started covering the team, that is going to allow the football ops to do what they do. There's a clear delineation of responsibility, and you've acquired a group of people that definitively understand what it means to be in that position and the responsibilities that it takes. And I think that's what makes this such a special opportunity. And I'm a fan as much as I am an analyst, and I get really excited looking at the people they've brought in, some of the recent hires in terms of director of player personnel, director of college personnel. Like, those are knockout, bang-out hires when you talk to people around the leagues. And so they're just making good decision after good decision. And again, does that mean they're going to win a Super Bowl in 4 years? No, but they've handled the process correctly thus far, and I think they're putting themselves in the best position to achieve that goal, which is, hosting that Lombardi Trophy.
And you know what? It all makes sense now. When I had a similar interview with John Keim, and he said, I talked to Logan Paulsen, and he said about Jaden Daniels, he's putting in the work, right? The work ethic is there. He said it doesn't mean he's going to be a great quarterback, but in order to be a great quarterback, you need to put in the work, right?
Right.
So I see what you're, I'm picking up what you're putting down there in terms of like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to the ultimate prize, but in order to get to that, these are the steps that
Right.
need to be taken, right?
Right.
Um,
100%.
so, all right, let's get a little nerdy now. So I've heard you talk
Yeah.
about play action.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've struggled with as a fan, someone that analyzes the game a little bit deeper than the lay fan, is we don't get a lot of explosive plays here in Washington. And I think a lot of big explosive or even just chunk plays, like for example, Sean McVay they don't do a lot of 50 60-yard touchdowns, but what they do have a lot of is 17 to 23-yard hits
Mm-hmm.
where they're going
Which
play
are
action.
explosives. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right in that little dig route right over the middle of the field. Kyle loves to do that. He used to do the little drift route here with Robert and Pierre. That was like a staple of the offense.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the play action is, I think, a key to that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have good play action with Jay, right? Let me ask you this. When's the last time we had effective play action here in Washington? You have to go back to the Shanahans?
So I mean, Shanahan is like the gold standard of it because they are like they have their PhD in play action.
Right.
All those guys from that tree, right? They're a special group of guys. Mm-hmm. But let me just head you off at the pass here and see if I can answer this question for you. So there are pros and cons to play action. I think a lot of people say, oh, you need a good play action passing attack to find big plays. But when you look at some of the teams, I think Detroit is a really interesting example. Not last year, but in 2021. I think it was Goff's second year. Basically, Goff had a hard time operating with his back to the defense, like a lot of quarterbacks do. They don't. That's one of the things they don't like about play action. It puts the defense in conflict when you turn around, when your back's facing the defense and the ball's out. It puts the defense in conflict because they can't see, they don't know what's happening. But it also makes it difficult for the quarterback to see. So one interesting thing I thought Detroit did, and I think L.A. does this a little bit too, is they took play action concepts with kind of unique backfield action and then just did them out of drop back. So they were able to find explosives not with play action, but they had an identity in this drop back passing game where it's like, hey, we're going to run a jet sweep. I'm going to kind of give this token fake to this guy. We're going to move the linebackers ever so slightly because we're shifting to a four-man overload to the offensive right, and now I can hit this backside dig. So even though it's not like really a play action, it's a token ball fake. The offensive line's pass setting. Play action to me is when the offensive line is selling run. You're getting a full team fake. There's nothing about the offensive line here that indicates pass, but because of how we've manipulated you and my quarterback has eyes on the defense, we've found an explosive play. So I think a lot of people identify explosive plays as needing to be done through play action. That's helpful because you can manipulate and create throwing windows. But I do think there's other ways to get there. And so, like, for example, Jay was really good at finding explosive plays off of drop back action because we had Jordan Reed, we had Vernon Davis, we had guys that were really dynamic, explosive down the field, especially in the seams. So my question is it doesn't have to be that, but what is the way you find them? Because you look at good offenses, and they always are top 5, top 10 in the NFL in explosive plays. And when you go watch their film, they all do it a little bit differently, right? But they all do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, look at Miami. Miami is a great example of this. Yeah. They're running all these, like, RPOs, but because they have so much team speed, those, which are technically quick game plays, end up as explosives. So it's just, how do we find those explosive plays? Play action, I think, is a great solution. If you're asking me, I think that's the best way to do it. But I'm biased because, my offensive background is that. But you look at Kansas City. They do a lot of great stuff from the drop back kind of different kind of backfield action, creating conflict. We talked about Miami already. So I do think there's a lot of different ways to do it, but you need to find a way to do it, I think, is the point.
I'm with you on that, but I'm like you, Houston, San Francisco, the Rams,
Green Bay.
We know the tree and we know what it looks like and what it's supposed to look like. And though it's not an accident that there's no more Aaron Rodgers, but Jordan Love picks right up where he left off. And with receivers you've never heard of, right? So don't get me started on that, but talking about Kliff Kingsbury, and his offense. So many people just hear Kliff Kingsbury's name and associate air raid, right? I didn't see that when he was in Arizona. I'm pretty sure you've had a chance to look at what he did in Arizona, and you've been out there this offseason. I know you probably haven't seen a whole lot yet, but they're installing. What do you expect from this offense this year with Kliff Kingsbury?
Yeah, so I think obviously, like you alluded to there, like people kind of identify him as being the air raid guy. But when you watch again 2021, when you watch some of the stuff from training camp, I don't care what you call the offense as long as it places the defense in conflict. And so, like, are we flooding zones? Are we kind of creating mismatches with personnel? Like, how are we creating conflict? And so some teams do it, like you mentioned the San Francisco 49ers and the Detroit Lions, by getting in tight, condensed formations, right? And, forcing you to kind of cover these big outs and expand the stuff. And they think you're not going to be able to expand at the same rate they can run the route. Kliff says, well, shoot, like most kind of NFL offenses do this as well. They get into spread out formations, find their best matchup, and create conflict in space that way. So I think you see elements of that from Kliff. I also think when you watch 2021, he understood how to create conflict with the running quarterback. Obviously, Jaden Daniels can run the football a little bit. Haven't seen a ton of that in training camp, but has that ability. Also, by spreading out, I think you give Jaden Daniels the opportunity to see and diagnose coverage at a high level, right? And so I think that's something I like. The tempo of the offense that they run also gives them an opportunity to kind of simplify defensive structure. So all of those things are things you're going to see. But I don't think of it as air raid. It's like there are some air raid principles, but every team has air raid principles.
Right.
It's air raid coupled with some Kyle Shanahan stuff, some Philadelphia stuff. And I think that's the credit I'm going to give to Kliff after watching kind of what he's done in the NFL and what he's done in college. He's very adaptable and he's very smart when it comes to making those adaptations to put the defense in conflict. So that's what I'm going to say. It's an NFL offense. Kliff's background's obviously the air raid, and there are principles of the air raid in there, but it is a more fleshed out version of that, kind of abiding by some of those similar principles.
Yeah, and my hope is, because I thought one of the biggest missteps last year was Eric Bieniemy refused to get his best players to football, right? He refused to tailor an offense that put his best players in positions to succeed. I'm hoping that's all we've heard this offseason is that Kliff Kingsbury simplified things. He's putting guys in positions to succeed. I hope that ends up being the case. Let's talk about the rookies. Out of all of the rookies that you've seen on the offensive side that were drafted, who do you see having the biggest impact outside of Jaden Daniels?
I'm glad you said outside of Jaden Daniels because obviously he's the quarterback. He's going to have the biggest impact, right? I'd say Luke McCaffrey. Excuse me. Luke McCaffrey is the guy that has really stood out to me during the OTA process. And again, there's still a long way to go to kind of see who's going to make the biggest impact. But he's the guy that I think has just had. I've just been so impressed by his professionalism, the way he finishes, the way he runs routes, his detail-oriented nature, the fact that he's coming early to spend time with his quarterback. I just feel like that is going to pay dividends with that type of guy. I think he might end up returning kicks for the team. Outside of him,
that's a nugget.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I don't think they've made any kind of definitive decisions about that, but I think when you look at his college film, he has that ability. He has the ability, wildcat quarterback stuff. He's run the football a ton. Like, he can be a playmaker for you. So it's just about finding his role, right? Because I think you have Jahan, I think you have Terry. What's his role going to be for you? So that'll be kind of interesting to watch as training camp develops. Another guy that could have a big impact, but I'm not sold on this yet, is Brandon Coleman. Again, if he ends up being your starting left tackle, that's going to be a pretty significant contribution to the organization. Yeah. I'm not sure he's quite there yet, but over the course of my career in covering the NFL, you see guys, the light bulb will come on, at some point in training camp. And you're like, okay, this guy's going to be a ball player for us. So maybe that's him. I don't know. But those are two guys that kind of stick out to me.
You're such a pro because that was my next question. I was going to transition to the left tackle position.
Right.
Who do you think is going to win that job? I think you kind of gave a hint as to where you're leaning, but obviously the pads haven't come on. There's a lot of time between now and when they have to make that decision. But what do you see happening at left tackle?
It's really hard to determine, to be quite honest, because it's still like the offense. We've seen a lot of the offense, but in terms of OTA offseason structure, you're seeing a lot of 7-on-7, right? So I don't really know what the run game is going to look like exactly yet. I don't really know what the screen game is going to look like exactly yet. So, for example, Scott, he had some reps at left tackle over the course of the offseason, and everyone's like, oh, well, he's kind of a swing rotational guy. But his body type, his movement skills might be more conducive to certain types of offensive runs and certain types of offensive screens and quick game and pass sets. So he might end up being the starter, right? I think Cornelius Lucas is probably the best pass protector of the bunch, but because he's so gosh darn tall, I think he does have a hard time with some of the more nuanced run game stuff. Like when you look at some of the stuff that Philly does, and I do think there's going to be a heavy influence of Philadelphia's run game because of Brian Johnson coming here, right? They like to pull the tackle quite a bit. I don't know if you want Corn living in that world.
You don't.
Do you trust Corn as a pass protector and say, hey, we'll kind of modify our run game around him, or do you say, hey, we want to kind of live in this, I'm going to say Kyle Shanahan world of run the football first, play good defense, find the quarterback easy throws, be patient to our explosives, and then we can live with a guy like Scott because the offensive line is going to be insulated pretty tremendously. Or does the young rookie come along and does he fit that mold a little bit better? So that's kind of my thought on the position. Like as we get farther into training camp, I think the identity of the offense will kind of take shape. What they're looking for at the position will start to unfold, and I think then we'll be able to settle in on ultimately who's got kind of the best advantage when it comes to who's going to start at left tackle.
Yeah. What you just described is a lot like 2012, right? How Robert was able, and the way Kyle and Mike designed the offense, took a lot of pressure off that offensive line. That wasn't the best offensive line in the world, but they played really well within that scheme. And I'm hoping, that's my hope, right? I said the same thing to John Comm. I'm hoping that that's what, because one of the biggest, question marks going into camp is the offensive line, right? You got this young quarterback that you just drafted. You invested all of these resources into him. You want to protect him. You can't do everything in one offseason, which is what I've been trying to, explain to the fan base. But I think they've done enough with this, the pieces that they've put in front of him, if guys play to their, the level that they can play at, but also the play calling has to take some pressure off of them. Quick game, getting the ball out of hands, run the ball, which is something we did not do last year at all, right? So I'm hoping that that's something that will happen this year. When you talk about the offense, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the tight end position, right? So this is the first time I feel like we've had serious talent at the position in a while. So 3 or 4, what do you think the number is first and foremost? And then we'll get into all of the guys that are there. But 3 or 4, you think they're keeping 3 or 4 tight ends?
That's a great question. I don't really know, honestly. We got to see what happens and what they want to do with the spot. I think at a minimum you keep 3, but I do think there are some really, really talented guys in that room.
I do too.
Like when you look at Armani, when you look at Colston Yankoff, when you look at Cole Turner, like those guys are unique, unique body types, unique skill sets. And I think the NFL is about sometimes finding unique guys, and there's a couple of them in there. So obviously Zach Ertz, I think, a lot of people thought maybe he was over the hill, but watching him in OTAs, like he's just got such good savvy as a route runner. John Bates, maybe best in blocking, wide tight end, in the NFL, I think. And then Ben Sinnott, obviously he's going to make the team because of where he was drafted. And then is there another guy that makes enough waves and kind of carves out a role for themselves on teams, or as the 4th tight end that says, I deserve to be on the roster? Like maybe you don't carry a fullback or whatever it is. So again, that's one of those questions where everyone kind of puts their lists out. But I'm like, it's still so early. We've still seen so little with regards to some of this stuff. We got to kind of be patient and let it all come to light.
So if it's 3, we're assuming that it's Ertz, Sennett, and Bates are your 3 tight ends you're keeping, right? So if they go with that 4th guy, how has Amani Rodgers looked off the injury? Does he look like he's back?
I think he's still coming along. You know, they say that injury is about 12 months, you know, to kind of get back. And then it's probably closer to like 15, you know, to be like
Yourself.
like starting to resemble yourself and kind of mentally get past it. And, you know, training camp will be right around 15. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be, you know what I'm saying? So we'll see how he looks coming back. I think he's a special athlete. You know, before the injury, you know, he was running like low 4.5s. I think it was 4.51. He's 6'6". He's 240. Like, he runs like a receiver, and he's got enough kind of toughness to him that he could play some stuff in. I think he's special, right? We've seen Cole Turner's ball skills. Colson Yankoff, I think, is a guy that
he's interesting.
He's interesting. Terribly miscast at UCLA. Runs well. Got some snap to him. Has some athletic traits. So,
how was he playing running back? Because you're brilliant. How was he playing running back? I mean, I know he's a former quarterback.
That's a Chip Kelly question. That's a Chip Kelly question. I think that, like, when I heard that, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Especially after seeing him, I was like, he's an obvious tight end. Now, they don't really use a traditional tight end in their offense as much, but still, man, like, put him in the slot, like, let that guy run around. Like, he might be the steal of the draft, in my opinion, because just not used correctly at UCLA.
Yeah, it was fun. It was just weird watching him in the backfield, taller than the quarterback, just kind of weird handling the ball. You know what I mean? It just looked weird, right?
Yeah,
all right,
100%.
last one. I'm gonna get you out of here, man. Any undrafted? You mentioned Colson Yankoff. I talked about him. Any undrafted guys kind of stuck out to you at camp? I know. I mean, in OTAs thus far. I know. Again, it's early. Pads haven't come on, but anybody stuck out athletically? You can tell. Anybody stuck out to you?
Tyler Owens from Texas Tech. I mean, his profile is
it's
absolutely it's insane, and he's big. He's like just a big dude. And so when he's on the field, you're just like he's lined up incorrectly because he looks like a defensive end, but he's lined up at safety. His film at Texas Tech leaves a little bit to be desired, no doubt. It's a little up and down. Obviously, you've checked it out. But the way he moves, the way he runs, it's just like hopefully this guy figures it out because there's something to the idea that you know, the planet theory. There's only a couple of people on the planet Earth that look and move like that, and I think he falls into that bucket of just kind of being a physical freak. And so I don't know if he ends up being a practice squad guy this year, but if that light switch turns on for him and he's able to carve out a role in this team, I really would love to see his ability. And obviously Colson Yankoff, I'm very high on him. A couple of the backs, actually. I forget their names at the moment, but the two
I like Wiley, the kid out of Arizona.
Yeah, caught the ball well and did some stuff where I was like, oh, all right. Like, you know, I thought they were kind of just not camp bodies, but I didn't see a long future for them. But after watching them move around, I thought, you know, maybe there's some upside there. So there's a couple guys in terms of that undrafted free agent class. The kid, the defensive tackle from
Virginia Tech. Right? Noel or something like that. I liked him a lot.
Twitchy son of a gun, man.
He's just undersized. That's it. He's just undersized. But
so all those guys from a physical standpoint are really, really interesting. It comes down to, like we talked about, can they find a role? Can the light switch come on? Because I will tell you this as an undrafted rookie, there are things you think you know. I'm sure this is true for all rookies. There are things you think you know, but you don't know. Like, I remember one of my favorite memories of my entire NFL experience was Chris Cooley came up to me. It's like the third day of camp, and he goes, "Logan, why are you getting off the ball late?" I was like, "I'm not getting off the ball late." And he's like, "Come here, let me show you something." And so he goes in the film room and he plays the play, and it looks normal. Like, you wouldn't even be able to tell if I was late. And he goes, play, pause, play, pause, play, pause. And he pauses it right when the ball snapped, and everybody else is moving and I'm frozen. And I was like, what? I am on the ball late. What's going on? And he said, go talk to the center. And I remember I had to go down and talk to Casey Rybach and Will Montgomery. And they were like, hey, you know, we're actually snapping the ball. Our cadence was wide 80. Wide 80 said hut. He's like, I'm snapping it on the S of set. I'm not snapping it on hut. And I was like, oh. And again, those are the little details.
The little nuances you were talking about.
That allow you to play, right? Wow. And I look at these guys and I'm like, is one of these young guys going to be able to figure out faster and make an impact this year? I don't know, but that's what training camp and these joint practices are for.
Wow. Oh man, that's an awesome story, man. I
Great story. I love it.
really appreciate the time. Normally, this is the point of the show where I go, "Hey man, tell the people where they can find your work," but everybody knows where they can find your work, so I don't even have to do that. I just want to know: are you doing the game time this year?
Yes, we are. We're still kind of working on the structure of that show. Because Dan gets to because he's the boss, he gets to kind of decide what he can and can't do.
Yeah.
So we're waiting to finalize the structure, but he'll be on there,
Yes.
and hopefully we'll be doing film breakdowns.
Yes.
And I know Brian Colbert's going to do a great job interviewing him. So we'll still be around. Just the structure might be a little bit different, but we're excited for it.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it, man. I really appreciate the time, Logan. This was so much fun. We got to do it again, man. You take
Yeah,
care.
absolutely.
Have a great season. Stay cool out there. I think it's going to be a really hot summer, man. So stay cool
it's gonna
out
be
there.
hot.
Yeah, hot. You just talked about coming in and getting cool, right? It's going to be a hot summer, but man, I really appreciate the time and keep killing it, man. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. You did a great job. This was a ton of fun.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Take care.
Yep, later.
Louie